I thought you were your sister." That was the first lie Julian Vance told her, and Elise Hartley would spend the whole of that summer deciding whether she believed it. His mouth was still close enough that she felt the words more than heard them, warm against the cooling dark, and the taste of the kiss, because it had been a kiss, an unmistakable one, had not yet faded from her lip. Beyond the hedge, her older sister was laughing at her own engagement party, bright as struck crystal. The man Elise had just kissed under the summer stars was the man her sister was going to marry. She stepped back. The gravel bit through the thin sole of her shoe. What she told herself later, that she was the one who pulled away first, would turn out to be one more thing she got wrong before the season was through. 3 days earlier, none of it had happened yet. 3 days earlier, the lake had lain flat and silver under a 9 o'clock sun that refused to set, and Elise had driven the last mile with the windows down and flowers still under her nails. The road to the Hartley summer house ran through a tunnel of oaks, and the smell came the way it always did, cut grass, warm dust, and underneath it the green, weedy breath of the water. She had been coming to this house every June since, before she could reach the pedals of a bicycle. It should have felt like arriving. Instead, her stomach was doing the thing it did, that tight, small clench. Because she knew what waited on the other side of the trees was a weekend built entirely around her sister's happiness. And her only job in it was to make the cake. Camille was on the porch before Elise had the car in park. "You're late," Camille called, and then, laughing, ran down the steps barefoot across the gravel, entirely undoing the accusation. She was 30, and she still ran like a girl, and she still had the knack of making a scolding sound like a welcome. "I said noon. It's nearly 9. Did you stop and bake something for a stranger on the way?" "I stopped for gas, and I stopped for a woman whose dog got loose on the highway," Elise said, climbing out, letting herself be folded into her sister's arms. Camille smelled of sunscreen and expensive grapefruit, and the faint char of the citronella she was always lighting. "The dog is fine. The cake is in the cooler, and if it slid, I will simply move away and change my name. You would not. You love us too much." Camille pulled back and held her by both shoulders, studying her the way she had studied her since they were small, cataloging, deciding. "You look tired. I drove 4 hours. You look tired in the permanent way. When did you last take a day off? The bakery doesn't run itself, Cam. That is precisely my point." Camille slid an arm through hers and steered her toward the house, and the old boards of the porch gave their familiar 3-note groan underfoot. Lanterns had been strung along the eaves already, unlit, swaying. "This weekend, you are not the baker. You are the sister of the bride-to-be, and you are going to sit in a chair by the water with a cold drink and let someone hand you things." "I have decided. You've met me," Elise said. "I don't let people hand me things. You will learn." Camille stopped at the door, and something in her went suddenly, uncharacteristically shy. Her hand found the small diamond on her finger and turned it, once, a nervous new habit. "Elle, I want you to like him. I know you think I move too fast. I know you've got that face all ready to make. I don't have a face. You have several. But this one," Camille touched her own cheek, mock solemn. "This is the one where you've already written the whole story, and it ends badly. I'm asking you to not read the last page yet. Just meet him." Elise looked at her sister, at the flush of real feeling under the teasing, the way she kept turning that ring as if to check it was still there, and felt the familiar tug of the only job she truly knew how to do, which was to hold the door open on someone else's joy and not let her own drought blow it out. "Where is he, then?" she asked. "This paragon. This architect of your happiness." "He's picking up the wine order in town. He'll be back before it's properly dark. Camille pushed the door open, and the house exhaled its own summer smell at them, cedar and lake damp and lemon oil. His name is Julian. And Elise, she hesitated on the threshold, half in gold light, half in blue dusk. Be nice. He's shyer than he looks. He pretends he isn't. I am always nice, Elise said, which was true, and which was also the thing she hid behind, and both sisters knew it, and neither said so. She carried the cooler into the big, cool kitchen and did what she always did in a strange emotional weather system, which was to find a counter and make it hers. She unpacked the sponge layers she had baked at 4 that morning, still faintly warm at their hearts, and the jars of lemon curd, and the cold, hard brick of butter she would beat to cloud. The kitchen window looked down the lawn to the dock, where the water had gone the color of a bruise healing, purple to rose. She rolled her sleeves. She set the butter by the open window to soften and listened to the cicadas wind themselves up in the oaks. That dry electric hum that meant true summer, and for a little while, elbow deep in the only language she trusted, she was almost content. Then the screen door slapped, and a man's voice said, "Sorry, I was told there'd be someone in here being stubborn about a cake." She knew the voice before she turned around. That was the thing she would never be able to explain to anyone, least of all herself. She knew it in her spine, the way you know a stair is there in the dark. She turned with a wooden spoon in her hand and the smile already assembling itself, the good sister's smile. And it came apart in the middle of her face. It was him. Not Camille's Julian, not the architect, not the paragon. Him, the man from the rain. 4 months ago, a city 300 miles from this lake, a spring downpour that had come down like a dropped curtain and driven half the street under the awning of a shabby, second-hand bookshop. She had been holding a paper bag, going soft at the seams. He had been holding a book he clearly didn't want to buy, but had grabbed as an excuse to stay out of the wet. And they had stood shoulder to shoulder for 40 minutes while the gutters roared, and they had talked about nothing, about the terrible book, about whether the rain would ever stop, about the way the whole world smelled like hot pavement and green, and when it eased he had said, "I don't want to be strange about this, but could I?" And she had said her bus was there, and she had run for it. And she had regretted it every rainy day since. She had gone back to that bookshop twice. She had never told a soul. She had made him up so many times in the retelling that she had half decided he wasn't real. He was extremely real, and he was standing in her sister's kitchen, and the recognition went across his face like a stone through still water. "You," he said. "Don't." It came out of her before she chose it. She set the spoon down very precisely on the counter, as if it were the only object left in the world she could control. "Don't say it like that." Like what? Like we know each other. Her heart was doing something ungovernable. Through the window she could hear Camille on the porch, on the phone with the florist, her happy, carrying voice. "That's the one." "The white ones. Yes, we don't. I don't know you. You're Julian." "I'm Julian," he agreed slowly, and she watched him try to fold the bookshop away, watched it cost him. He was taller than the awning had let him be, in a soft gray shirt with the sleeves pushed up, and there was flour. No, there was chalk, or plaster, some pale dust on his forearm, and the absurd domestic detail of it undid her further. "And you're the sister." "The baker." "Camille's," he stopped. "She talks about you constantly. She never said your name and a face. She just said, 'My sister,' like it was a whole country." "It's Elise," she said. "Elise, he said it the way you set something down that you're afraid to break." Then, quieter, glancing once at the door and the bright, oblivious voice beyond it, I looked for you. After, I went back to that street like a— He shook his head. It doesn't matter. It can't matter. I know that. No, she said. It can't. For a moment, neither of them moved. The butter softened in its dish. The cicadas sawed on. Somewhere a boat's motor idled far out on the water and then cut, and the silence rushed in. And in the silence was every rainy afternoon she had gone back to that shop and stood in the poetry section pretending to browse. She thought, with a clarity that frightened her, I have to make this man's wedding cake. I have to stand in a white tent and watch him marry my sister, and I have to smile the entire time, and I will, because that is what I do. I hold the door. Congratulations, she said, on the engagement. She's the best person I know. Something moved behind his eyes that she chose not to read. She is, he said. She's remarkable. And it was true, and it was also the saddest agreement she had ever heard two people reach, and she picked her spoon back up because her hands needed a task or they were going to do something unforgivable. The wine, she said. Camille said you went for the wine. It's in the truck. I got waylaid by a rumor of a stubborn woman. A ghost of the bookshop passed over him, that dry, careful humor she had spent 4 months trying to reconstruct from memory. She was right, for the record, about the stubborn. Get out of my kitchen, Julian. Yes, chef, he said, and went, and the screen door slapped behind him, and Elise stood with both hands flat on the cold marble and breathed until the cicadas came back into focus. Then she creamed the butter and sugar until her arm ached and her eyes stung. And she told herself it was the effort, and the summer went on arranging itself around her like a beautiful room she had not been invited to sit down in. The next 2 days she was very good. She was so good at it that no one noticed anything at all, which was, she thought grimly. The whole tragedy of being the reliable one, you could be quietly coming apart in plain sight, and everyone would simply assume you were fine. Because you were always fine, because your fineness was load-bearing. She built the cake in the cool of the mornings, 3 tears going up under her hands, and she let Camille drape her in the afternoons and talk weddings. And she watched Julian across every room and got very, very skilled at looking somewhere else a half-second before he looked at her. They were not always successful at avoiding each other. The house had a way of shrinking. She reached for the same cabinet he reached for, and their hands met on the same jar of honey, and both said sorry too fast. He came down for water at midnight, and found her at the counter piping sugar roses by the light over the stove, unable to sleep. And neither of them said a word. He filled his glass and stood a moment too long in the dark doorway. And then he said, very low, "They're beautiful." The roses, and went back up, and she ruined the next 3 flowers because her hands had started to shake. On the afternoon before the party, Camille sent them into town together. I can't, Elise said. The cake is under a cloth in the cold pantry, looking like something out of a magazine, and you know it. Camille was doing 7 things at once. Phone against her shoulder. A clipboard of seating in her hand, radiant with the specific joy of a woman orchestrating her own celebration. I need the flowers picked up, and the good glasses from the rental place, and Julian doesn't know a peony from a paper bag. And you can't lift 40 champagne flutes alone. Go both of you. Be back by 5. I love you. I have to take this. Margot, hi. No. The long tables, and that was how Elise came to be in the cab of a borrowed truck with Julian Vance, the windows down. The summer roaring green past them, 300 miles and 4 months from the last time they had been trapped together by circumstance and weather. For a long time neither of them spoke. The road unspooled. Heat shimmered off the blacktop in liquid sheets. She watched his hands on the wheel and made herself stop. "We can just not," she said finally. "We can be two people who never stood under an awning. People do it every day. They meet the wrong person at the wrong time, and then they simply live politely for decades. Is that what we're doing?" He kept his eyes on the road. "Living politely for decades? Yes." "All right." He signaled, though there was no one for a mile, a man who used his blinker on an empty road, and something about that nearly finished her. "Then can I say one thing first and put it away forever? And you never have to answer it." She should have said no. "One thing. I'm not marrying her to be safe from you," he said. "I want you to know that, because I think you'll decide I am, and it isn't true. I love your sister. I asked her before I ever saw your face again. I didn't know you were the country she kept talking about." His jaw worked. "I would give a great deal for the world to have dealt these cards in a different order. But it dealt them in this one. So I'm going to marry her, and I'm going to be good to her every day of my life, and I am never going to say any of this to you again. That's the one thing. It's put away now." The peonies rode home in the truck bed in 10 white buckets, nodding, and neither of them said anything else, and the not saying filled the cab like water filling a sinking room. By evening the lawn had become a fairyland. The lanterns Elise had watched swaying unlit on her first night were burning now, floating gold in the blue dusk, and there were 40 people on the grass in linen and pale silk, and a quartet playing something warm near the roses, and the lake threw the whole party back at itself in trembling reflection. Camille stood at the center of it in a dress the color of the inside of a shell, luminous, laughing, catching Elise's eye across the crowd every few minutes to make sure she was watching, to make sure she was here for it. Elise raised her glass each time. Elise smiled each time. Her face ached with the smiling. Julian gave a toast. He was clumsy at it, endearingly, and the crowd loved him more for the clumsiness. And he found Camille's hand and said she had walked into his careful, ordered life like weather through an open window, and everyone laughed and awed, and Elise stood at the edge of the light with the taste of her own champagne gone flat in her mouth, and thought that she could not do this. Not the years of it, not one more hour of it. She set her glass on a passing tray and walked out of the gold and into the dark, down the sloping lawn toward the hedge and the water, just to breathe where no one needed her to be fine. The garden past the hedge was cool and loud with crickets, and smelled of crushed mint and the mineral cold of the lake. She stood with her hands pressed to her own face. Behind her the party was a warm rumor, the quartet, the laughter, her sister's bright, unmistakable voice rising over all of it. She did not hear him come across the grass. "You disappeared," Julian said. She turned. He was a shape against the lantern glow, tie loosened, a man who had also needed to breathe. "I needed air," she said. "You should go back. She'll want you." "I know." He didn't move. The crickets roared. A moth blundered between them, ghost pale, and she flinched, and he reached without thinking to brush it from her bare shoulder, and his hand stayed a half-second on her skin, warm, and the half-second was the whole ruin. "Elise, I can't stop. Then don't say it," she whispered. "You put it away." "You said you put it away." "I lied," he said simply, and the dark did the rest. She would never be able to reconstruct who leaned first. She would try, on 100 sleepless nights, and never once get it straight, only that the space between them closed, and his hand came up to the side of her face, the way you'd cup a candle against wind, and she was kissing him, or he was kissing her, and it was nothing like she had built in 4 months of rainy afternoons. It was better, and it was so much worse. It undid a knot in her she hadn't known was tied. Her fingers found the front of his shirt, His breath broke against her mouth like something giving way after long pressure. "I thought you were your sister." He said it as they broke apart, ragged, both of them, and it was so obviously, magnificently untrue. She was in a dark green dress, and Camille was in shell pink 12 feet of lantern light away. That it landed between them as exactly what it was, a door thrown up too late in front of a house already burning. "You didn't," Elise breathed. Her lip was stinging, her whole body was ringing like a struck glass. Don't make it small. Whatever this was, don't make it a mistake in the dark." "Elise." And then, from the top of the lawn, close, far too close, a voice. "Julian?" Camille, coming through the gap in the hedge, one hand lifting the hem of her shell-pink dress off the grass, her face still bright with the party, still entirely trusting, still turned toward joy. "There you are. Everyone's asking where the—" She stopped. She looked at her sister. She looked at the man she was going to marry. The lantern light swung on its wire, and for one long swinging second it lit all three of their faces at once, and the crickets went on roaring as if nothing in the world had changed. "Oh," Camille said softly, "you found each other." Good, and Elise understood, with a cold plunge straight through the center of her, that her sister had not yet seen it. That there was still, for one more heartbeat, a version of this night that could be saved, and that the choice of whether to save it or shatter it had just landed, whole and terrible, in her own two flower-scarred hands. The choice lasted less time than it takes a lantern to swing back on its wire, and Elise made it the only way she had ever known how. She held the door. "There you are," she said, and her voice came out steady, which astonished her, a smooth, clean surface over the churn beneath. She stepped sideways, out of the small charged dark and into the spill of gold from the party, so that the distance between herself and Julian widened into something ordinary. "I stole him. I'm sorry. I needed a hand with the buckets, and he was the tallest thing in reach." "The buckets," Camille repeated. Her gaze moved between them, unhurried, still lit from within by her own good night. "The peonies drink like sailors," Elise said. "Half the water's gone. I wanted them right for the tables tomorrow, and I couldn't reach the tap behind the shed." She heard herself building it, brick by brick, the way she built everything, and she hated the ease of it. He carried. "I directed. It's the natural order." Camille laughed, the real laugh, the struck crystal one, and the danger passed over her without landing, a cloud that never quite reached the sun. "That does sound like you both." She reached for Julian's loosened tie and set it straight with a wife's small proprietary tug, and Elise made herself watch. Made herself learn the cost of the thing she had just done in the dark. "You've got grass on your knee, darling. Were you kneeling in my flower beds?" "I was reaching for a tap," Julian said. His voice was not as steady as Elise's. She heard the flaw in it, the hairline crack, and prayed her sister's happiness was loud enough to cover it. "Apparently, well, come back. Both of you." Camille slid an arm through each of theirs, one sister, one husband-to-be, and drew them up the lawn toward the music as if she were the only thing holding the night together. Which, Elise thought, in every way that mattered, she was. Mother's just arrived, and she's already asking where the bride disappeared to, and if I don't produce you in the next 30 seconds, she'll assume I've been thrown in the lake. The word mother landed in Elise's chest like a swallowed stone. She had time for one breath of crushed mint and lantern smoke, one glance back at the black gap in the hedge where the whole of her life had just quietly changed its shape, and then the party closed over the three of them again, warm and bright and none the wiser, and up on the flagstone terrace, waiting by the roses with a champagne flute she had not touched, stood Diane Hartley. Their mother did not run barefoot across gravel. Their mother arrived. She stood very straight in dove-gray silk, with her hair swept up and her rings catching the light. And she watched her two daughters and the man come up the slope with an expression Elise had spent her whole childhood learning to read, and had never once mastered, a smile arranged over an accounting. "There she is," Diane said, and offered Camille a cheek. "I was beginning to think you'd staged your own vanishing. It's very bad form to leave 40 people admiring an empty dress." Her eyes went to Julian, softened by a precise, measured degree. "Julian, that was a lovely toast. Weather through an open window. I may steal it for the announcement." Then, last and coolest, to Elise. "Elise, you look thin. Is the cake finished?" "Nearly. The last tier goes on in the morning." "Good." The photographer comes at 11. Diane sipped, and her gaze traveled once, lightly, over Elise's bare shoulder, over the exact place where a man's hand had rested 3 minutes ago, and Elise felt the blood go cold and still under her skin. But her mother only said, "You've caught the sun. You always did burn out here," and turned back to Camille, and the moment folded shut. And Elise could not have said whether she had imagined the whole of it. "Come," Diane said, "both my girls. The Pentlands want a photograph, and I promised them the whole matched set." They went where they were told. They always had. It was past 1 before the last car crunched away down the oak tunnel, and the lanterns were snuffed one by one, and the lawn went back to the crickets and the lake. Elise did not go up to bed. She could not have lain still inside her own skin. She went to the kitchen instead, to the only counter in the world that was reliably hers, and she took the last tier of the cake out of the cold pantry and set about the sugar roses she had ruined 2 nights running, because if her hands did not have a task, they were going to press themselves to her mouth and hold in a sound she could not afford to make. The screen door did not slap this time. It opened carefully, and he closed it the same way. "You should sleep," she said, without turning. The piping bag was warm in her grip. She laid a petal, curled, laid another. "The photographer comes at 11. You'll want to look like a man who didn't lie to 2 women in 1 night. Elise, don't." She set the bag down. The stove light hummed. Outside the window the lake was a sheet of black glass, and the moon lay broken across it in a long silver seam. "I saved it. Tonight, do you understand what I did out there? I stood in front of my sister, and I made it into buckets and a tap and grass on your knee, and she believed me, because she has never once had a reason not to. That is the most expensive lie I have ever told, and I told it for her. So you do not get to come down here at 1 in the morning and make me feel it again. I'm going to call it off." She turned then. He stood in the doorway in the same soft gray shirt, sleeves down now, undone at the throat, and his face was the face of a man who had made a decision and was terrified of it. The plaster dust was gone from his forearm. She noticed that absurdly, the way you notice the smallest wrong thing when the largest one is unbearable. "No," she said, "you are not. Elise, I can't stand up in front of a church, and you can and you will." She crossed the kitchen. The tiles were cold through her bare feet, and she was glad of it, glad of anything that was only a fact. "Listen to me. If you call it off now, 3 days after that party, 40 people go home and do the arithmetic, and the answer they land on will not be that you're an honorable man who couldn't marry without love. The answer will be her." She jabbed one finger toward the ceiling, toward the room where her sister slept in the certainty of being chosen. It will be that Camille Hartley was set aside, that something was wrong with her, that she was almost a wife, and then, quietly, wasn't. She will spend years being the woman it didn't work out with, and she will never, ever know why. Because you and I will make very sure she doesn't. You want to be good to her every day of your life? This is the day. Marry her or ruin her. Those are the cards. You said it yourself. The world dealt them in this order. The refrigerator shuddered and hummed. Somewhere out on the water, a night bird called once, a low, mournful note, and the silence afterward was enormous. That's not a life, Julian said quietly. What you're describing, that's a sentence. It's a marriage. People survive them. She heard how it sounded and did not take it back. Better people than us have wanted the wrong thing and simply not taken it. That's most of what being a decent person is, Julian, wanting the wrong thing and keeping your hands in your pockets. He looked at her for a long moment, and something in his expression shifted from grief into a terrible, clear-eyed tenderness that was so much worse. You really believe that, he said. That the kind thing and the true thing can't be the same thing. That someone always has to go without. He shook his head slowly. Who taught you that? Because they were wrong, and they cost you something, and you've been paying it ever since. Get out of my kitchen. Her voice cracked straight down the middle. Please, yes, chef, he said, but gently, without the old joke in it, and he went, and she stood alone with 24 sugar roses and did not cry. Because crying was a thing you did when there was any give in the situation at all, and there was none. Morning came bright and merciless. The lake threw the sun back in 10,000 pieces, and the photographer arrived at 11 in a linen jacket, and the whole matched set of Hartleys assembled on the terrace among the roses to be preserved. Elise had not slept, and had covered it with cold water and a steadiness that was becoming its own kind of skill. She was crossing the terrace with the second coffee tray when her mother's voice stopped her. Not loud, never loud, but pitched to carry exactly as far as it needed to, and no farther. Elise, a moment. Diane stood at the stone balustrade with her back to the lawn, looking out at the water. A woman who had chosen the one place on the terrace where no one could come up behind her unseen. Elise set the tray down and came to stand beside her, and for a while neither of them spoke, and the cicadas began their dry morning wind up in the oaks. You didn't sleep, Diane said. The cake. Her mother turned a ring on her finger. The same gesture Camille had, Elise realized with a small, cold shock, the exact same nervous turn, inherited without either of them knowing. Do you know what this house costs to keep, Elise? This lawn. That dock. The roof your grandfather put on that we've patched 4 times since. She did not wait for an answer. More than the bakery clears in a year. A great deal more. We have been, for some time now, keeping up an appearance that has run rather ahead of the accounts. Elise went very still. I didn't know it was. Of course you didn't. You were never meant to. That was rather the point of managing it. Diane's mouth made its arranged smile. Julian Vance is not simply a charming man who builds beautiful things. He is a man who builds beautiful things and is paid extravagantly for it, and who has been, since the engagement, quietly generous in ways your sister doesn't fully register, because your sister has never once in her life had to think about a roof. This marriage is not only a happiness, Elise. It is the thing that keeps the water on and the doors open and your grandmother's house in this family. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Why are you telling me? Her mother looked at her then, fully, and the accounting behind the smile was suddenly, nakedly visible. Because you have a face, Diane said, that has never once in 30 years learned to lie to me, whatever it's learned to do to everyone else. And it has been wearing an expression since I arrived last night that I do not like, and that I intend never to see again. She let that sit. A gull went over, crying, "Whatever it is, Elise, whatever weather has blown through this house, you will close the window on it. For your sister, and for this family, and for the roof over all our heads. You are very good at going without. You've had a great deal of practice. Don't develop opinions now." The tray of coffee cooled between them. Down on the lawn the photographer was arranging Camille against the roses, laughing, tilting her chin, and Camille was laughing back, luminous, wholly unaware that her happiness had just been priced out loud by the two people who loved her most. "Smile," Diane said, lifting a hand toward her younger daughter as if summoning her to be photographed. "They want the sisters now." Elise smiled. She had, after all, had a great deal of practice. The next hour she stood shoulder to shoulder with Camille among the roses and turned her face toward the light on command, and every time the shutter clicked she felt it like a small door shutting somewhere in her chest. Camille kept reaching for her hand between shots, squeezing it, whispering things, "Can you believe it, Elle? Can you actually believe it?" And Elise squeezed back and said she couldn't, which was the truest thing she'd said in 2 days. It was when the photographer released them for the light to soften that the second blow came, and it came, as the worst ones do, wrapped in kindness. "I've been meaning to ask you," Camille said. She'd drawn Elise down the lawn, away from the terrace, to the low white bench by the water where they'd sat as girls, with their feet not reaching the ground. She was turning the ring again. "And you're allowed to say no. You're always allowed to say no to me, even though you never do." A breath. "Will you stand up with me?" "At the wedding." "Maid of honor. I know you'd rather bake it than be in it. I know you'd rather be useful than looked at. But Elle," her eyes had gone bright and wet, the party gloss gone, only the sister underneath. "There is no one else. There has never been anyone else. It has been you and me since before I can remember. I can't walk toward the rest of my life without you standing right there where I can see you. Please." The lake lapped at the pilings. The sun was warm on the back of Elise's neck. 3 feet away, her sister was asking her, with her whole open heart, to stand at the altar and hand her the ring that would bind her to the man Elise had kissed in the dark 12 hours ago, and to smile while she did it, and to mean it. "Of course," Elise said. "Of course I will." Camille made a sound, half laugh, half sob, and folded her into a hug that smelled of grapefruit and sunscreen and the particular warmth of a person who has everything she wants, and over her sister's shoulder Elise looked up the lawn and found, standing at the terrace rail, watching them, Julian, and beside Julian, arriving late and unhurried in a pale suit. A briefcase in one hand and the other lifted in easy greeting, a man Elise had never seen. "Who's that?" she asked into Camille's hair, keeping her voice light. Camille pulled back, wiped her eyes, followed the look, and her whole face changed. A flicker Elise almost missed, there and gone, a small tightening around the mouth. "That's Roland," she said. "Julian's partner. His business partner. He's here to talk about the announcement and the settlement and all the paperwork nobody wants to think about the week of a party." She stood, smoothing her dress. "He's clever. He was against the engagement, actually, at the start. Thought Julian was moving too fast." A small, brittle laugh. "Imagine, 2 of them, you and Roland, both certain I was a mistake." "I never said you were a mistake." "No," Camille said, already walking back toward the terrace, toward the 2 men. "You just had the face." And she went, and Elise sat alone on the white bench with the lake at her back, and watched the man called Roland set down his briefcase, and shake Camille's hand a beat too long, and turn, deliberately, unmistakably, to look all the way down the lawn at her. He was perhaps 50, silver at the temples, with the kind of unhurried composure that comes from always knowing the numbers in the room. He held her gaze across the whole width of the lawn for 1 second, 2, 3, long enough that it stopped being a glance and became a message. And then he smiled, a small closed smile, and inclined his head to her once, as if they shared something. They did not share anything. She had never seen him before in her life. And yet the smile followed her all through the afternoon, through the setting of tables and the counting of chairs, a splinter she couldn't find to pull. It was still with her that evening when she carried a stack of folded linens down the hall past the study and heard, through the door left an inch ajar, the low murmur of 2 men's voices, and, because she was her mother's daughter after all, and had learned the family art of hearing exactly as much as she needed to, she stopped. "Not my business what you do with your evenings," Roland was saying, easy, amused. "But it becomes my business the moment it's photographed." You understand that. The Pentland investment closes the same month as the wedding. The same month, Julian. Diane's people, my people, the whole careful house of it. You picked the timing, not me. There's nothing to photograph. Julian's voice, tight. "I'm sure there isn't." A pause, the clink of a glass set down. "You've had a look about you since the moment I arrived, that's all. A man who's misplaced something. I've seen it before. It usually turns out to have a name." Another pause, and when Roland spoke again, the ease had cooled into something with an edge under it. "Marry the girl Julian. She's lovely, her mother's connected, and the paperwork is beautiful. Whatever's got that look on you, put it down before it costs all of us. I didn't spend 6 years building this to watch you hand it back for a summer feeling." Elise stood in the dark hall with the warm linens against her chest, her heart going hard, and understood 2 things at once, coldly, completely. The first was that Roland did not know. He was guessing, fishing, warning, a clever man reading a look and covering every exit. He had no name. Not yet. The second was that if he ever got one, he would not hesitate to use it, and it would not be Julian he ruined, because Julian was the beautiful paperwork and the closing investment and the 6 years of building. It would be her. It would be Camille. It would be the roof. She should have moved. She should have taken the linens on down the hall and let the men keep their study and their numbers. But she had shifted her weight, and the old floorboard beneath the runner gave its small, betraying groan, and the voices inside stopped. The door opened. Roland stood in the light of it, glass in hand, and looked down at the woman in the hall with the folded sheets, and his face did something quiet and satisfied. The face of a man who has just watched a card he suspected was in the deck-turned face up on the table. "Elise," he said. He said it the way you confirm a spelling. Camille's sister. The one who bakes. His gaze moved over her, unhurried, and came to rest. She would swear it. She would be certain of it on every sleepless night to come, on her mouth. "We haven't met." Roland Ashby. "I do the parts of Julian's life that aren't beautiful." He smiled the small, closed smile. "You've a great many linens there. Let me get the door for you." "I have it," Elise said. "I'm sure you do." He didn't move out of the light. Behind him, in the study, Julian had risen from his chair and gone very still, and Elise did not look at him, could not, because Roland was watching her not look, and that was the whole of the danger. "You know," Roland went on, conversational, "I said to Julian just now, he's got a look about him lately. A man who's misplaced something." He tilted his head. "You wouldn't know anything about that. What a man might misplace, out here, on a lake, 3 days before he promises the rest of his life away." "I bake," Elise said. "I don't keep track of what other people lose." Something flickered in his eyes, appreciation, almost, the pleasure of a good player meeting another. "No," he said. "No, I don't suppose you'd admit to it if you did." He stepped back at last, out of her way, and gestured her down the hall with his glass, gracious as a host in a house that wasn't his. Sleep well, Elise. Big day coming. Lots of promises to keep. She walked the length of the dark hall with her spine straight and the linens warm against her hammering heart, and she did not let her step quicken, and she did not look back. And behind her she heard the study door close, and then, faint through the wood, Roland's voice dropped low, saying something she couldn't catch, and Julian's, sharper, answering, and then nothing at all. In her room she set the linens down and stood at the window. The lake was black and still. The lanterns were dark on their wires. Down the hall her sister slept the sleep of the chosen, and somewhere below her a clever man was lying awake, doing arithmetic that had her name in it now, an unknown quantity he intended to solve. She pressed her fingertips to the cool glass. 3 days ago she had driven up the oak tunnel with flour under her nails, and one job: hold the door, make the cake. Keep her own drought from blowing out someone else's joy. She had been so sure that was all this weekend would ask of her. The wedding was in 9 days. And now there were 2 people who could burn it all to the waterline. The man she couldn't stop wanting, and the man who had just decided to find out why he couldn't either, and only one of them was on her side. And she was no longer entirely certain which. Somewhere out on the black water the night bird called again, once, and got no answer, and Elise stood at the glass a long time, watching the dark, and trying to remember how a person breathed when both the true thing and the kind thing were standing on opposite shores, and the tide was already going out. The seamstress came on the 4th morning, and the house filled with pins. She was a small, brisk woman named Petra, who spoke around a mouthful of them and moved the way a swift moves, all economy and sudden direction, and by 10 o'clock she had turned the sunroom into a country of tissue paper and half-made silk. Camille stood on a low stool in the center of it, in the wedding dress for the first true fitting, and even Elise, who had braced herself against exactly this, felt her breath go for a second at the sight of her sister lifted up into all that pale light. "Well?" Camille said. She was afraid to move her arms. "Say something. You have the face. Is it the good face or the bad face?" "I can't tell from up here." "It's neither." Elise came closer, and the smell of the room reached her, the dry paper smell of the patterns, the faint machine oil of Petra's scissors, and under it Camille's grapefruit and the warm cotton heat of the morning. "It's the face I make when there's nothing to fix." "Liar. You always find something to fix. Not today." And that, at least, was true. Petra circled the hem on her knees, pinning, and Camille stood very straight and turned her ring under her glove where she thought no one could see. And out through the tall windows the lake lay flat and blinding, and somewhere down the hall a man's low voice was on a telephone, unhurried, saying numbers. Roland had been in the house 3 days now. He had a way of being everywhere and nowhere, a briefcase open on the dining table 1 hour and gone the next, his pale suit at the end of a corridor, his small closed smile arriving before he did. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. He had taken the study for his own the way water takes a low field, without asking, simply arriving and filling it, and the family had rearranged itself around the fact of him the way it rearranged itself around Diane. "Arms up, please," Petra said. And Camille lifted them like a girl surrendering. Laughing, "You'll stand just here," she said to Elise, tilting her chin toward the imagined altar, "where I can see you." I told the officiant. I said, "My sister goes on my left, close enough to grab, in case my knees do the thing they do." She caught Elise's eye, and her whole face softened out of its brightness into something younger and more frightened. "You won't let me fall over, will you, Elle? I have never once let you fall over. No, Camille said. You never have. Petra sat back on her heels. The waist, she announced to the room in general, has come in since the measuring. 2 centimeters. The bride is not eating. The bride is too happy to eat, Camille said. The bride will eat, said Diane, from the doorway, where she had been standing for some unknown length of time in dove gray, a cup of coffee held level in both hands. We are not photographing a wraith. Elise, see that she has something at noon that isn't champagne. Her gaze moved over the dress, the pins, the tissue, and came to rest on her elder daughter lifted up in the light, and for one unguarded instant something crossed Diane's face that Elise had almost never seen there. A plain, unaccounted love quickly filed away. It's beautiful, Camille, she said. You'll do. High praise, Camille murmured, but she flushed with it. Pleased, Diane's eyes went to Elise last, and held, and said without a word everything she had said at the balustrade. Close the window, whatever weather has blown through this house. And then she turned and went. And her heels counted themselves away down the hall toward the study, toward Roland, toward the numbers. She likes him, Camille said when the heels had gone. Roland. They speak the same language, money and worry. She turned the ring. I don't, particularly, like him. Is that terrible? He looks at me as though I'm a line in a contract that hasn't been initialed yet. You don't have to like your husband's accountant. He's not the accountant. He's I don't know what he is. The one who makes it real. She frowned down at the pins. Julian goes quiet when he's in the room. Have you noticed? He's the only person who makes Julian go quiet. I hadn't noticed, Elise lied, and reached up to steady her sister's hand where it had started, again to turn the ring, and Camille smiled down at her, and the shudder of the whole doomed morning clicked once more in Elise's chest. He found her that afternoon at the worst possible moment, which was becoming his particular talent. She had taken the finished tears out to the cold pantry to check them, and had stayed too long in the dark and the chill, because it was the one room in the house where no one wanted anything from her. When she came out into the corridor with her hands full of the small box of sugar work, Julian was there, coming the other way with a roll of drawings under his arm, and there was nowhere for either of them to go, because the corridor was narrow, and the house had shrunk again, the way it always did. Sorry, they both said, too fast. Neither of them moved. I've been trying, he said quietly, to be somewhere you aren't. It's a small house. It's an enormous house. You're doing it badly on purpose. I'm doing everything badly on purpose. It's the only way I seem to manage it. He looked down at the box in her hands. What are those? The roses. For the top tier. She tilted the box so he could see them, and did not know why she did it, except that it was a thing to do with the terrible nearness. 24 sugar roses, pale gold, each one furled tight at the heart. I ruin about 1/3 of them. You have to make extra. They break if you breathe on them wrong. They're beautiful, he said, and it was the same thing he'd said in the dark kitchen at midnight, in that same low voice, and they both heard it land, and both looked away. Roland asked me about you, Elise said. That brought his eyes back fast. What did he ask? Nothing, everything. He asked whether I knew anything about a man who'd misplaced something. She kept her voice even, a smooth, clean surface. I told him I bake. I don't keep track of what other people lose. Julian shut his eyes for a second. Elise, he can't. You don't understand what he is. He isn't cruel. That's what people always expect, and it makes them careless. He's just precise. He finds the load-bearing thing and he puts his weight on it to see if it holds. He shifted the drawings under his arm. And the load-bearing thing in all of this is you, not me. He can't touch me. I'm the reason the money moves. But I know exactly what I am in this, Elise said. I worked it out at 1 in the morning 3 days ago. You don't have to draw me a diagram. Down the corridor, a door opened, and Diane's voice said something, and Roland's answered, easy and low, and the two of them in the narrow passage went instantly, instinctively still, the way animals go still, and stood not touching, with the whole roaring weight of not touching between them, until the voices moved off toward the terrace and a screen door slapped, and they were alone again in the dim. Go, Elise breathed. Please, just go be where I'm not. Do it well this time. Yes, chef, he said, and there was no joke in it at all, and he went. Roland came for her that evening, and he did it gently, which was worse. She was on the dock. It was the hour when the lake gave the day back, the water gone the color of weak tea and then of copper, the far shore blurring into its own reflection, and the air smelled of warm creosote off the sun-baked boards and the green, cool breath coming up off the water beneath. She had come down to be alone with the one horizon in the place that didn't want anything from her. She heard his shoes on the planks and did not turn. May I? Roland said, and sat anyway, at the end of the dock, a careful arm's length away, setting a low crystal glass down on the wood between them like an offering. He'd loosened nothing. Even here, even at the edge of the water in the falling light, he was buttoned and pale and exact. I don't swim, he said conversationally. Never learned. My whole life around men with lake houses and I never once got in. It offends people. They take it personally. A man who won't get in the water. What do you want, Miss Ashby? Roland? He looked out at the copper water. I want the same thing your mother wants, as it happens. Which surprised me, because I don't usually find myself on the side of the mothers. He turned the glass a quarter turn on the board. I want this wedding to happen, and the investment to close, and everyone in this beautiful, over-mortgaged house to go on standing in the sunlight, looking exactly as fortunate as they look. That's all. I'm a very simple man with a very expensive job. Then you should be talking to Julian. I make the cake. You make the cake, he agreed. You make it very well, I'm told. And you save the party, out at the hedge, when it needs saving, buckets and a tap, wasn't it, and grass on a knee. That was quick of you. I admired it when I heard it. He let that sit, watching the water, not her. You have a talent, Elise, for being the one who cleans it up. I have the same talent. It's a lonely trade. People never quite forgive you for it. They need you, and they resent the needing, and you learn to live on being necessary instead of being liked. I imagine you know all about that. The boards were warm through her thin dress. A fish rose somewhere out in the copper and left a spreading ring, and a night-bird tried its first low note in the reeds. Say the thing you came to say, she said. All right. And here at last he turned and looked at her, and his face was not unkind, and that was the whole horror of it. Your bakery is behind on its lease. 2 quarters. The landlord's a client of mine. It's a small world, the world where money lives, everyone is standing on everyone's foot. And your mother's house, this house, is a very handsome envelope with almost nothing inside it. You know both of these things, I think, though perhaps not that I know them. He picked up the glass and did not drink and set it down again. I am in a position to make the first problem disappear entirely and to ease the second. Quietly, gratefully, as a friend of the family, which I intend to be for a long time. I can make you, Elise, a woman who never has to lie awake over Elise again. In exchange for what? For nothing. He smiled the small closed smile, for everything to go on being what it looks like. for the maid of honor to stand up on her sister's left, close enough to grab and hand over the ring, and cry the right amount, and go home to her bakery that no longer keeps her awake. For whatever weather I keep smelling in this house, to have blown itself out to sea by Saturday and never once make landfall in a photograph. He rose, unhurried, brushing the dock dust from his pale trousers. I'm not threatening you. I want to be clear. A threat is what you use when you've nothing to offer. I'm offering. It's a much stronger position, and it's the one I prefer, because I like you, genuinely. You're the only person in this house who hasn't once lied to my face. He picked up the glass. Think about it. There's time. There's till Saturday. He walked back up the dock, and his shoes counted him away over the warm boards, and Elise sat alone at the end of it with the copper water going to slate, and understood that the man had just handed her the roof, the lease, her mother's grateful old age, and the rest of her sister's untroubled life, all of it wrapped in silk, and that the price was simply to be, forever and without complaint. Exactly what she had always been. She did not go up for a long time. The false high came the next night, and she walked into it with her eyes open, which she would never be able to forgive herself for. She could not sleep. There was no sleep left in the house for her, and near midnight she went down, not to the kitchen, but out, barefoot, across the dew-cold lawn, down to the boathouse where her grandfather's old wooden skiff hung in its slings above the black water. She had always come here as a girl when the house got too full of feeling. She had not expected to find the lantern already lit. Julian was sitting on the overturned hull of the skiff with a pencil and a scrap of paper, and when the door creaked he looked up without surprise, as though he'd been waiting a long time for whoever the lake would send. "I couldn't sleep," she said. No, he set the pencil down. "Neither of us has slept since April, I think. We've just been pretending to, in separate cities. The boathouse smelled of tar and old rope and the cold mineral dark of the water slapping the pilings underneath, and moths turned at the lantern. And she should have gone straight back out the door and across the wet grass to her cold, clean bed. She sat down on the hull instead, at the far end of it an arm's length, the same careful arm's length Roland had kept, and hated that the two distances were the same. "What are you drawing?" she said. "Nothing. A house." He turned the scrap so she could see it. A few quick lines, a low roof, a long window. "I do it when I can't think. Roland says it's a nervous tic, and I bill for it. It's the one thing about me he's ever got completely wrong. A ghost of the old dryness. I've been designing the same house since I was 19. I've never built it. A kitchen at the heart, big windows, a bad chair by the stove that nobody's allowed to throw out. Room for more people than I've ever actually had. It sounds like a nice house. It's the house I don't get to build," he said simply, and put the paper in his pocket, and neither of them pretended not to understand him. For a while they just sat, and the water talked to the pilings, and it was, she would think later, ashamed of the word, happy. That was the unbearable thing. Not the wanting. The ease. He told her about the terrible book he'd bought that rainy afternoon, that he still had it, that he'd never read a page of it, and never would. She told him about the woman with the loose dog on the highway, and he laughed, low, so it wouldn't carry, and she watched his careful, ordered face come undone into laughter, and understood exactly what her sister had walked toward like weather through an open window. "Tell me one true thing," she said. "And then I'm going in, and we don't do this again." He was quiet a moment. The lantern hissed. "When Camille talks about you," he said, "she lights up. Every time. My sister the baker. She's so proud of you it comes off her like heat. And every single time she does it, I think, that's the person. That's the one." And then, I remember. He looked at the black water. I'm not choosing between two women, Elise. I keep needing to say that, even to myself, because it would be easier if I were. It would make me a simpler kind of coward. I love your sister. I would never have looked twice at the rain if I'd known. But you can love the whole wide world of a person and still know, the way you know a stare in the dark, that there's one particular soul it was always going to be, and get the timing so wrong it can't be fixed. That's the true thing. That's the one I've got. She stood up before he'd finished, because if she stayed on that hull 1 second past the end of that sentence, she would do something that could not be undone, and she went to the door and stopped with her hand on the cold latch. "Good night, Julian," she said. "Good night, Elise," and she got out that time. She counted it, later, as the one night she got out. It was Camille who broke it in the end, and she did it out of love, which was the way everything in that house was done. The morning after the boathouse, Camille appeared at the kitchen counter while Elise was crumb-coating the base tier, hoisted herself up to sit on the marble the way she'd been told 1,000 times not to, and swung her bare feet, and watched her sister work with an expression Elise couldn't place until the girl spoke, and then she placed it at once, and her stomach dropped clean out of her. "Can I tell you a secret?" Camille said, "and you promise not to make the face?" "I make no promises about the face. Elle, I'm serious. Nobody knows this. Not Mother, not nobody." She turned the ring, and her voice went low and quick. A confession getting out before it could be stopped. "I know about the money. I know the house is hollow. I know what this marriage is holding up. Roland thinks I'm a line in a contract, and Mother thinks I'm a happy fool who's never had to count, and Julian thinks he's rescuing all of us and being terribly quiet and noble about it." She smiled, and it was the most heartbreaking thing Elise had ever seen, because it was brave. "I'm not a fool. I know I'm partly a solution. I've known since spring." The spatula went still in Elise's hand. "Cam, let me finish, or I won't get it out." She pressed on. "Here's the secret. I don't mind. That's the thing I can't tell any of them, because they'd all feel so terribly guilty, and then they'd pity me, and I would rather go into the lake than be pitied. I chose it, Elle, with my eyes open. He's kind, and he's clever, and he'll be good to me, and yes, all right, he'll keep the roof on. And I decided that a marriage built on kindness and a shared problem is more than most people ever get. And I'd be a coward to turn it down, waiting for some weather through an open window that only happens to other people." Her eyes were bright now, spilling, but I need one person in the whole world to know I went in clear-eyed. Not tricked, not blind. I need it to be you. Because you're the only one who's never lied to me. Tell me you know I'm not a fool. The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside a mower started somewhere and stopped. Elise stood with the spatula in her hand and buttercream on her knuckles and looked at her sister, brave, clear-eyed, choosing with both hands the exact life that Elise had spent 1 midnight and 2 kisses trying not to steal, and understood that there was now no version of the truth she could ever tell that would not take this from her, not the man, but the thing worth more than the man. The belief that she had chosen well and been chosen honestly, and that her one clear-eyed decision had been the right one. "You're not a fool," Elise said. Her voice held. "She would never know how. You're the bravest person I know. You always were. I'm the coward. I read the last page and never turn up for the story." Camille laughed, wet, and hopped down off the counter and hugged her hard, buttercream and all, and Elise held her sister and looked over her shoulder at the 3 tiers standing white and perfect under their cloth, and felt the last door she'd been holding open swing shut against her. from the inside, with her still in the room. She decided that afternoon to leave, not on Saturday. Before she would finish the cake, she would not fail Camille the cake, that at least she could still give clean, and then she would invent a supplier, an oven fire, a catastrophe at the bakery 300 miles away that only she could put out. And she would drive back down the oak tunnel with the windows up this time, and she would not be in the photographs, and she would not stand on anyone's left, and she would send a long, loving, impossible letter and let them all be angry at her for it. Because anger was survivable, and the truth was not. She would take Roland's silk-wrapped price and never speak of it and let it save them. And she would go without, because she was very good at going without. She'd had a great deal of practice, and there was, she told herself, standing over her open case at the blue hour with her hands not quite steady, a mercy in doing the thing you were already the best at. She was folding the green dress, the one from the hedge she'd worn it once and would never wear it again, into the bottom of the case when the knock came at her door, soft, 2 knuckles. Not Julian's knock. She knew his now. God help her. This was lighter. Elle? Camille's voice, through the wood, bright and careful. Are you decent? I found the strangest thing, and I have to show someone before I combust. Elise pushed the case shut with her knee. Give me a second. It can't wait a second. It's too good. The door opened anyway. Camille had never in her life waited for a second, and she came in barefoot in her nightdress with something held against her chest, glowing with the particular delight of a small, marvelous discovery. And she sat down on the end of Elise's bed exactly where the closed case sat, and did not seem to notice it at all, because she was looking down at the thing in her hands. I was putting Julian's books on the shelf in the study, she said. The ones he brought, he's got boxes of them. The man buys books the way other men buy socks, and this one fell out. And look, Elle, look how strange. She held it up. A shabby second-hand paperback, its spine cracked white, its cover soft with damp long dried. It's dreadful. It's the worst book I've ever seen. He's never read a word of it. I asked him once, and he went all funny about it and said it was sentimental and wouldn't say why. She was laughing, turning it over in her hands. But here's the mad part. Look inside the cover. There's the shop's stamp. Look. And the little pencil price. And the date they sell them. They date them. Isn't that quaint? And it's from this spring. April, from a bookshop 300 miles from anywhere he had any reason to be. She looked up, delighted, entirely innocent, her whole trusting face turned toward her sister. Your city, Elle. He was in your city that exact week, and he never once mentioned it, and he keeps this awful book like it's made of gold. Isn't that the strangest thing? What on earth do you suppose he was doing there? The book was open in her sister's hands, the pencil date facing up, and outside the window the last of the light went off the water. And Elise stood with her packed case behind her knees, and no lie left anywhere in her whole practiced body to reach for, and Camille waited, smiling, for the answer. I don't know, Elise said, and heard how thin it came out, and knew that Camille heard it too, because Camille had always been able to hear the difference between her sister's easy lies and her impossible ones. The book stayed open in Camille's hands. The pencil date faced the ceiling. Outside, the last copper had gone off the water, and the room had filled with the blue hour. That drowned soft light that makes everything look like it is already a memory of itself, and the cicadas in the oaks had wound down to almost nothing. And in the almost nothing, Elise could hear her own heart and the small, dry rasp of Camille's thumb moving over the cracked spine. You always know, Camille said. She said it lightly. She was still smiling. You know what oven a stranger, baked in from one bite. You knew I was going to say yes to him before I did. You don't say I don't know, Elle. It's not in you. Cam, put the book down. Why? And now the smile did something. It did not fall. That would have been mercy, and there was to be no mercy in this room tonight. It held and went brittle, the way sugar holds a shape a full second after you know it has already broken. Why would I put it down? It's only an awful book. Her eyes moved, slow, unwilling, down from her sister's face, down over the green dress folded on the top of the case itself, shut, sitting on the end of the bed under her own bare feet, packed, ready. A thing that had no reason to exist 3 days before a wedding. You're leaving, Camille said. There's a problem at the bakery. Don't. It came out of Camille the way Elise's own don't had come out of her at the hedge, involuntary, ripped loose. She stood up off the bed. The book was still in her 2 hands. Don't you do it too. Don't you stand there in front of me and build it brick by brick, the oven, the supplier, the catastrophe only you can put out. I've watched you do it your whole life to everyone else, and I have loved you for it. And I am telling you, if you do it to me right now, I will never forgive you. Not the leaving, the building. Tell me one true thing. Her voice cracked clean down the center, the exact same fracture Elise had heard in her own voice at midnight in the kitchen. You're the only one who's never lied to me. That's the whole of what you are to me. Don't be the last one, too. The night bird called once, out on the black water, and got no answer. And Elise, who had held the door open on other people's joy since before she could reach the pedals of a bicycle, who had a great deal of practice at going without, discovered that there was one thing she was not, in the end, able to do. And it was this. She could not take the bookshop from her sister. She could take everything else. Not that. It was raining, she said. Camille went very still. 4 months ago. April, a downpour like a dropped curtain. I was under an awning outside a second-hand shop with a paper bag going soft in my arms, and a man came in out of the wet holding a book he didn't want. Her voice was level. She had no idea how. We talked for 40 minutes about nothing. About that book. About whether the rain would ever stop. And when it eased, he started to ask if he could, and my bus came, and I ran for it, and I never knew his name. I made him up for 4 months. I decided he wasn't real. She looked at the paperback in her sister's hands. He kept the book. Cam, I didn't know that until just now. I didn't know he'd kept it. The blue light held them both. Say his name, Camille whispered. Please don't make me. Say his name, Elise, Julian. The word came out of her like something set down that she was terrified to break. I didn't know. I swear to you on this house, on grandmother, on every morning we ever sat on that bench with our feet not reaching the ground, I did not know until I turned around in that kitchen with a spoon in my hand, and it was him. He was already yours. You were already glowing. I would have driven back down the oak tunnel that first night and never come back if I'd thought for 1 second I could do it without you knowing why. Camille looked down at the book. She turned it over once in her hands, the way she turned her ring. And then she set it very gently on the dresser, spine up, the date hidden, as though putting it face down could put the whole thing back inside its cover. 3 days, she said to the book, not to Elise. You've been in my house 3 days, baking my cake, standing on my left. She lifted her head. Her eyes were dry now, which was worse than tears, dry and enormous. The hedge. There were never any buckets, were there? There was no tap behind the shed. No, you kissed him. The word hung in the drowned blue air. He kissed me, Elise said. And then, because she had decided somewhere in the last 30 seconds that she would not, in this one room, on this one night, do the family thing and shave the truth to a survivable size, and I kissed him back. Both. It was both. I won't make it smaller than it was. You deserve it exactly the size it is. Camille made a sound. It was not a sob. It was the sound of a person setting something down that has been very heavy for a long time. An exhale with a shape in it, and she sat back down on the end of the bed next to the case and put her hand flat on top of it, and looked at her own hand there for a while. Well, she said at last, softly, so the weather does happen to other people. It happened right through my own open window while I stood there admiring the view. She almost laughed. It came out wrecked. God, Elle, of all the people, of all the awnings in all the rain. I was going to go, Elise said. I was going to invent the fire and drive home and let you have him and never say a word and take. She stopped. Camille's head came up. Take what? And Elise, who had meant to carry that one to her grave, found that she had run entirely out of doors to hold. Roland came to me on the dock, she said, 2 nights ago. He knows about the lease on the bakery. I'm 2 quarters behind, Cam. I never told anyone. He knows the house is hollow. He offered to make it all disappear. The lease, the roof, Mother's grateful old age. All of it. Wrapped in silk. And the price was that I stand on your left on Saturday and hand you the ring and cry the right amount and let the weather blow out to sea and never once make landfall in a photograph. Camille was on her feet again. Something had come into her face that Elise had not seen there before. Not at the party, not in the wedding dress, not on the bench by the water, a straightening. A cold, clean fury that had nothing brittle in it at all. He said that to you, Camille said, on our dock. He priced me. He sat on my grandfather's dock, and he put a number on my sister's silence. Cam, where is he? Camille, it's near midnight. This can wait until nothing about this is going to wait. Camille crossed to the dresser, picked the awful book back up, and held it against her chest the way she'd carried it in, a small, marvelous, terrible discovery, and turned in the doorway, barefoot in her nightdress, luminous with something far more dangerous than joy. You've spent your whole life saving everyone from the truth because you decided the rest of us were too fragile to hold it. Me most of all. Her voice shook and did not break. Come and watch how fragile I am. Both of you have badly, badly underestimated the bride. She went out into the dark hall, and Elise, after one frozen heartbeat, went after her, because that at least had never changed and never would. Where Camille went, Elise followed close enough to grab in case her knees did the thing they did. The study door was ajar, and the lamp inside was lit, and Roland was at the desk in his shirt sleeves, with papers fanned in front of him and a low crystal glass at his elbow, and Julian was standing at the dark window with his back to the room, and both men turned when the door came all the way open under Camille's flat palm and struck the bookshelf behind it. Camille, Roland said, unhurried, rising, the perfect host in a room that wasn't his. It's late. Is everything? Sit down. Roland, she did not raise her voice. She had, Elise realized, their mother's trick after all, pitched to carry exactly as far as it needed to, and no farther. You don't get to stand up when I come in. Not any more. She set the book on the desk in front of him, on top of his beautiful fanned papers, spine up, and she opened it to the cover, to the pencil date, and turned it to face him. Do you know what this is? Roland glanced at it. Something moved behind his composed face, a quick recalculation, a card he had suspected turning over at last. It's a book. It's the whole thing you've been smelling in this house for 3 days. She looked at Julian then, and her chin came up. Look at me, Julian. You've been very quiet and very noble and very careful not to look at me all week, and I'd like you to look at me now." Julian turned from the window. His face was the face of a man watching a wave he has seen coming for a long time finally reach the shore. "Camille," he said, "whatever she told you, she told me the truth, which is more than either of you managed, and you're the ones who wear the good suits." She was trembling now, all over, but her voice held, level and terrible and clear. "April, the rain, the awning, the bus she ran for, you kept the book." She pressed one finger down on the pencil date. "You bought your fiancé's sister a 40-minute romance in a bookshop 300 miles from anywhere you had a reason to be. And you kept the evidence on your shelf, and then you came out to my lake and asked my mother for me anyway, and none of you, not you, not her, not Roland with his silk-wrapped number on the dock, not one of you thought I could survive being told." Roland set his glass down with a small, precise click. "Camille, I want to be very clear that whatever offer you believe you offered my sister money to watch me marry a man whose whole soul was already spoken for." Camille turned on him, and it was the coldest Elise had ever seen her, colder than Diane at her most arranged. "You called it a strong position, offering instead of threatening. Do you know what it actually was, Roland? It was the exact moment I stopped being afraid of you. Because now I know the worst thing you can do is tell the truth, and you're too much of a coward to do that. So you go around buying the silence you can't earn." She picked up the fanned papers from under the book, the settlement, the closing, the beautiful paperwork, and held them out to him. Not thrown, not torn, simply handed back. "There's no wedding, so there's no investment to protect, so there's nothing here you're needed for. You don't swim, you told my sister. Then I'd stop treading water in my family and go home." The room rang with the silence after it. "There's no wedding," Julian repeated, very low. No, Camille's voice finally, at last, cracked, but only once, only on that one word, and she gathered it back. "There isn't." "And before you decide to be noble about that, too, before you tell me you'll marry me anyway to keep the roof on and be good to me every day of your life, I've heard the speech. Elle told me the shape of it. I want you to hear the thing I came in here to say, because I only have the courage for it once." She looked at her sister, then at the man, then back. "I chose this marriage clear-eyed," she said. "I told Elise that this morning. Kindness and a shared problem," I said, "more than most people ever get." And I meant it. But I said one other thing, and I'd forgotten I said it until an hour ago. Her mouth trembled into something that was almost a smile. I said I wasn't going to be a coward, waiting for weather through an open window that only happens to other people. Well, she spread her hands. "It's in my house. It's standing in this room. And it turns out I would rather walk toward the rest of my life alone than be the reason two people spend 40 years pretending it isn't raining. That's not noble. Don't any of you dare call it noble. It's just that I looked at the life you were all so carefully building for me, and I realized it had a bad chair in the corner nobody was allowed to throw out, and the chair was me." Julian took a step toward her. "Camille, the money, your mother's house, the lease, all of it, is not your problem to solve by marrying me, and it was never my sister's to solve by handing me over quietly." Camille wiped her face with the heel of her hand, briskly, a woman done. "We'll manage. Hartleys have been managing a hollow house for 3 generations. We're extremely good at appearances." A wet laugh. "But I'll tell you what I won't do. I won't let him, a jerk of her chin at Roland, hold my sister's lease over her head like a lit match for the rest of her life. So you're going to fix that, Julian, not by marrying anyone, by doing the one thing you're actually good at, which is the truth about money. Julian looked at Roland for a long moment. "Dissolve it," he said. Roland went still. "I beg your pardon." The partnership. 6 years of it. Dissolve it. Julian's voice had gone quiet and even and utterly certain, and Elise understood, watching him, that this was the man Camille had walked toward, not the shy one, not the noble one, but this one, the one who found the load-bearing thing and did not flinch. "You built beautiful paperwork on top of my name, Roland, and my name is the thing that moves the money. You said so yourself. So it moves where I move. The Pentland investment doesn't need you. It needs me, and it needs a firm without a man in it who prices women on docks. I'll buy you out. It'll cost me most of what I have, and it'll cost me the next 5 years building it back. And I would give a great deal more than that to never sit across a table from you again. You'd throw away, I'd throw away, the version of my life where I did what you told me to do because it was tidy." He picked up the awful damp book off the desk and held it and looked at it, and for the first time all week the plaster dust weariness went out of his face. "I've been designing the same house since I was 19, Roland, a kitchen at the heart, a bad chair by the stove, room for more people than I've ever had. You always said it was a nervous tick I could bill for. It's the only thing about me you ever got completely wrong. I'm going to go build it now. And you're not in it." Roland looked around the room, at the three of them, at the returned papers, at the book, and something in his unhurried composure finally understood that the deck had turned all the way over. He gathered his glass and his jacket and his beautiful ruined paperwork, and at the door he paused and looked back, and there was, for one honest second, something almost like respect in his tired, clever face. "You were the only one who never lied to me either," he said to Elise. "It's a lonely trade, cleaning up after other people. I told you that." He inclined his head once, the old message, but drained of its threat now, only a man acknowledging a better player. "I hope the bakery does very well." "Good night, Mr. Ashby," Elise said. And he went, and his shoes counted him away down the dark hall, and this time they did not come back, and somewhere near the front of the house a door opened and closed on the warm summer night, and the study was suddenly, enormously, only the three of them. For a moment nobody moved. The lamp hissed. Out on the lake the night-bird tried its low note again, and, for once, another answered it. Far across the dark water, 2 notes finding each other over all that distance. Then Camille turned to her sister, and the fury went out of her all at once, the way a held breath goes, and underneath it was only the girl from the bench by the water, and she was shaking. "I need," she said, "to not be brave for about 10 minutes. Just 10. Can you do that? Can you sit with me and let me be a mess and not fix a single thing about it? I can't fix things," Elise said, going to her, folding her in, buttercream long gone from her hands, but the reflex the same. "I only ever pretended I could. I read the last page and never turned up for the story. You said it yourself. I did say that." Camille laughed into her shoulder, wet and wrecked and real. "I'm a horror. I'm going to be insufferable about having been right about your face for years." She pulled back and held her sister by both shoulders, cataloguing, deciding, the way she had since they were small. And then her red-rimmed eyes went, deliberately, over Elise's head to Julian, standing there with the awful book still in his hand and his whole future rearranged around him, and not one idea in the world what he was allowed to do next. Not tonight, Camille said to him, quietly. Do you understand me? Not tomorrow. You do not get to walk out of my broken engagement and into my sister's arms while the tent's still up on the lawn. That's not weather. That's just weather chasing, and I won't have her be the thing you caught on the rebound. Her voice was iron and love in equal measure. You want her, you court her properly. Slowly, from the beginning. Rain and all. And you wait until I can stand at that wedding without wanting to walk into the lake, and then you put me on her left, close enough to grab. Those are the cards. I'm dealing them this time. Julian looked at her for a long moment. That's more than fair, he said. It's more than I've earned. Yes, Camille said. It is. Now both of you get out of my study. I'd like to be spectacularly sad in private, and then I'd like a very large piece of that cake, because there's no one left to photograph it, and I've been not eating for a week to fit into a dress I'm never going to wear. And that, a wet laugh breaking out of all three of them at once, unwilling, in the ruins, was the first hour of the rest of it. It did not fix itself overnight. That was the thing nobody tells you, the thing the party lanterns and the sugar roses conspire to hide. There was no scene the next morning where the sun came up and everyone was healed. Real healing is not a movie scene. The next morning was, in fact, one of the worst of Elise's life. There were 40 people to uninvite, and a tent to strike, and a photographer to pay for photographs of a wedding that would not happen. And their mother to face, and Diane Hartley did not receive the news of a canceled wedding, and a canceled investment, and a hollow house left hollow, with anything resembling grace. She received it at the kitchen counter at 7 a.m, standing very straight in her dressing gown with a cup of coffee gone cold in her hand, while her 2 daughters told her together, because they had agreed in the dark hours that neither would let the other carry it alone. Let me be sure I have understood, Diane said, when they had finished. The morning light came flat and merciless off the lake through the window and lay across the cold marble. You have ended the engagement. He has dissolved the thing that made him solvent to us, and the 2 of you have decided this is a triumph. She set the cup down with a small controlled click. The roof, Camille, the lease, Elise, everything I told you at the balustrade, everything I have held together for years, while you both looked the other way and called it not thinking about money. You have set fire to all of it in a single night over her mouth worked, over a feeling, over weather. Yes, Camille said. We did. And Elise, standing beside her sister at the counter that had been her one reliable country all week, watched their mother's face. The accounting arranged over the love, always, for as long as she could remember, and did the thing she had never once in 30 years dared to do. She reached across and took her mother's cold hand, the one with the rings, the one that turned itself the way Camille's did, the way her own did, the same nervous inherited turn none of them had known they shared. Mother, she said, who taught you that the kind thing and the true thing can't be the same thing? Because somebody did. And it cost you something, and you've been paying it ever since, and you tried to hand the bill to us. Her voice was very gentle. We're not going to take it. That's all. We'd rather have a hollow house we tell the truth in than a beautiful one we can't breathe in. You can come and live in the true one with us. There's room. Julian's building a kitchen at the heart of it and a bad chair by the stove nobody's allowed to throw out. But you have to leave the accounting at the door. The kitchen was very quiet. The refrigerator hummed. Outside, a mower started somewhere and stopped, and the cicadas began their dry morning wind up in the oaks. That electric hum that meant true summer. The same sound that had greeted Elise on her first night when she still believed her only job was the cake. Diane looked at her younger daughter's hand on hers for a long time. And then something happened in her arranged face that Elise had seen only twice before, once at the wedding fitting and once, long buried, in a childhood she could not quite reach. The smile came off it, all at once, like a cloth pulled from a mirror, and underneath was a woman who was very tired, and had been holding a hollow house on her own shoulders for 3 generations, and had never once been allowed to set it down. "My mother," Diane said, "since you ask. She told me love was a thing you could not afford, and duty was a thing you could not refuse. And she was standing in a house exactly this size when she said it, watching the water exactly like that. Her fingers turned the ring once. I have hated her for it my whole life, and I have done nothing but repeat her, word for word, to the 2 people I would burn this house down for." She drew a breath that shook just slightly at the top of it. A bad chair by the stove. "Nobody's allowed to throw it out," Camille said. Well, Diane picked her cold coffee back up and set it down again, and for the first time in the memory of either of her daughters, she laughed. A short, rusty, astonished sound, as if she had found a room in her own house she'd forgotten was there. "It sounds dreadful. I shall need my own chair. And I refuse to give up the good glasses. If we are going to be poor and honest, we are at least going to be poor and honest with the good glasses." And that was how the Hartley house, hollow and handsome and finally, at long last, telling the truth, stopped being a beautiful room that Elise had not been invited to sit down in. They struck the tent that afternoon, all of them together, in the heat. And it was hard. And it was not romantic. And Camille cried twice into the folded canvas and let herself be seen doing it, which was the newest and bravest thing of all. The peonies, still nodding in their 10 white buckets, went to the church anyway, and to the hospital in town, and to the woman on the highway whose dog had once got loose. Because Elise tracked her down. Because some doors are worth holding open, after all. Julian courted her slowly, exactly as ordered. He drove 300 miles and stood outside her bakery in the rain. Real rain, an ordinary autumn downpour, months later, when the lake house was shut for the season, and the summer had gone gold and then bare, and he did not come in. He stood under the awning across the street with a terrible second-hand book in his hand until she saw him through the fogged glass and came out, wiping flour from her fingers, and crossed to him through the wet and stood shoulder to shoulder with him under the dripping edge the way they had the very first time. "I don't want to be strange about this," he said, "but could I finish the sentence I started in April? I've been carrying it around for the better part of a year, and it's getting heavy." "Finish it," Elise said. "Could I take you somewhere dry," he said, "and buy you something warm, and tell you about a house I'm finally building, and do this properly, from the beginning, for as long as it takes, with your sister's permission, which I have in writing because she made me sign for it." He held up the book. I brought the evidence. And Elise Hartley, who had spent a whole summer deciding whether she believed the first lie he ever told her, stood in the honest rain and found that she believed, at last, the one true thing instead. And she reached up and drew his face down to hers and kissed him, gently, deliberately, in the gray daylight where anyone could see, with no lanterns and no hedge and no dark to blame it on, the third kiss. And the only one that changed everything, because it was the only one that cost nobody anything at all. Camille stood up at their wedding 2 summers later, on the bride's left, close enough to grab, and did not once look as though she wanted to walk into the lake. She had, by then, taken over the failing accounts of the Hollow House and made them unhollow through sheer clear-eyed stubbornness and a small, fierce catering company that the woman with the loose dog turned out to invest in. She caught the bouquet laughed her struck crystal laugh, and announced to the whole tent that she had no intention whatsoever of using it. She simply hadn't wanted anyone else to have it. Diane gave a toast and stole Julian's line, whether through an open window, and cried without arranging her face over it, and afterward sat in her own chair by the stove, in the house with the kitchen at its heart and the long window looking down to a different, smaller stretch of water, and let her daughters hand her things. And Elise made the cake. 3 tiers, sugar roses furled tight at the heart, a third of them ruined and remade because they break if you breathe on them wrong. She built it in the cool of the morning, the way she built everything, in the one language she had always trusted, but this time, when it was done, she did not stand at the edge of the light, holding the door open on somebody else's joy. This time she sat down. "They're beautiful," Julian said, coming up behind her in the doorway, the same low voice, the oldest joke between them now worn smooth as a lake stone. "The roses." "Get out of my kitchen," she said, and did not mean it, and he knew it, and neither of them moved, and outside the long window the summer lake threw the whole warm evening back at itself in trembling gold, and somewhere a night-bird called, and this time was answered. If this story warmed you, if you believed in Elise the way she finally learned to believe in herself, stay a while longer with us. Subscribe to Adrian Romance Stories, and let the next one find you the way the right person always does. A little late, a little unlooked for, and exactly in time.